was the reason was me, but the occasion and the excuse was British Rail, I'm afraid, or that's a name from the past, National Rail, I think they call themselves these days. In any event, my apologies that we've kept you waiting. We are now ready to go. So, first of all, thank you very much for taking the time to come here today. What you're going to hear about today is how the Justice for Harrods Survivors project developments is progressing. So, before we go into details about the Harrods claim, we want to also explain and let you know that this is not only and no longer only about survivors from Harrods. We now have clients who have suffered abuse at Harrods, at Fulham Football Club, at the hands of Al-Fayed, and at various places associated with Al-Fayed. We have been contacted by over 400 people. I'm going to pause. 400 people. Not all survivors. Some witnesses, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But we are currently engaged with 400 people who have been impacted by this abuse. Our survivors have been let down by significant parts of our society. And the threats to them and the obstacles placed in front of us as we seek to navigate the path to justice for them has not dimmed, in fact, it's enhanced our resolve. Our websites, harrodssurvivors.com and fulhamfcsurvivors.com are places where survivors of all abuse are welcome to visit. Corporates across the world mustn't be allowed to hide behind the response. It's all different now. Particularly, we say, when much of the senior leadership remains the same. Sporting institutions can't be allowed to hide behind apologies to excuse a lack of accountability. So if you have been or know someone who's been the victim of abuse at the hands of a corporate or a sporting institution, your voice must be heard. And whether you wish to remain anonymous or you wish to speak publicly, your wishes will be entirely respected. Please get in touch through our websites. I can assure you that you will be greeted by an understanding voice and a voice grounded in professionalism and sensitivity. We are again privileged, I emphasise that word, privileged, to share the same room as many of our survivors. Many more are watching across the world. Once again, we salute you for your incredible bravery, and it's our honour to serve you. On September the 20th of this year, we conducted our first press conference. Today we see you again. We are joined, as I say, by some of our amazing survivors. I'm also joined by my two fantastic colleagues, Maria Mulla and Bruce Drummond. We thank you, the members of the press and the media, for your care and consideration of these appalling matters. And our purpose today is to update you with the progress of our crusade for justice. The sheer scale of abuse perpetrated by Al-Fayed and facilitated by those around him sadly continues to grow. The journey with our survivors to have the voice they so desperately deserve has been a deeply personal one for us as the barrister team. We have always and continue to believe that our job is to ensure that all voices are heard equally, that this is not seen as a group action, and that justice is achieved through a professional, independent process which takes into account the fact that the effects of abuse are always felt individually, and the process of grieving through those effects can never be part of a tick-box exercise. The past 6 weeks, and the weeks before that, have shown to us that the consequences of abuse and the fight for justice are truly all-encompassing. We are 3 individuals. We are 3 individuals whose sole preoccupation is the pursuit of justice for our survivors. We will not be diverted from our path. In order to ensure that no one, and I say this to the wider audience, in order to ensure that no one is under any illusions about our resolve, we are delighted to announce that we have reached agreement with a major law firm who will be handling the processing of these claims. A law firm who have extensive experience in this field, have areas of expertise in this field, and, lest anyone be concerned about our ability to fight this course to the end, backing of over £1 billion. Even more exciting, but very sad that we are having to do it, is the fact that we can today announce that the first letter of claim has been sent to Harrods. That is the beginning of the formal legal process. Anyone who thinks that it's one, it'll be followed today by another. It'll be followed the day after by others. And it'll be followed by hundreds more. If we are pushed, if our survivors are pushed into having to defend themselves in order to achieve justice, we are ready, we are resourced, and we are determined. This statement of our intent is the clearest signal possible that it is time for Harrods, time for the Fayed estate, and time for Fulham Football Club, amongst other sporting institutions potentially, to understand that now is the time to do the right thing. On the 20th of September, we asked them, certainly asked Harrods to do the right thing. We're still waiting. And we will not flinch until the quest for justice is satisfied. Anybody who is, quite understandably, still worried about embarking on the process, we say, you can be part of our community. It never ceases to amaze me how remarkable our community is, how our community of survivors group together to help. And I use the word community wisely. Group discussions. Always available to help people who are finding it understandably traumatic. We are privileged to know them. And we say, if you feel and wish to join, you too will be privileged to know them. You can be anonymous, as we said. You can be vocal. What will be the case is that you will no longer be alone. And you will no longer be susceptible to threat and intimidation. I also want to say a couple of words of thanks before introducing my colleagues to talk to you more. I want to thank the many people, certainly in excess of 20 and growing, who, although not survivors themselves, have come forward with accounts to support the layers and layers of abuse that we have uncovered. So again, anybody listening to this who thinks that our survivors are lone voices, you're wrong. Our challenge to anyone who seeks to avoid proper liability is that we are coming for you. We reiterate our thanks to our friend Keaton Stone, who worked tirelessly with the BBC to expose the abuse, which sadly counts his wife, our client Sophia, amongst its numbers. So the programme for today is that Bruce is going to outline the latest on the Harrods claim. Maria is going to take us through the recent Financial Times report on Saturday, which deals with the Harrods process. And I will conclude with some matters regarding Fulham Football Club. Before we open the floor to questions, which we will, you will see a video from one of our survivors. You will know who she is. So, with that, Bruce, may I hand over to you?
Thank you, Dean. And good morning, everybody. Before I begin, can I also commemorate and salute these amazing, amazing ladies that I'm looking at here. They are just fantastic. So brave, so courageous, and so supportive of each other that is an amazing sight for us to see. Having started with this case at the very beginning and seen it grow and seen the relationships grow and the support of you all. Well done, you guys. I think that, as Dean mentioned, it's been now, I think, since we last gathered to speak about the abuse inflicted by Fayyad, and that abuse that was aided and abetted by Harrods, the business that he owned at the time. I can say that there have been many long days and nights spent gathering testimony from the dozens and dozens of brave women who are coming forward. And it's been a difficult time. It's been very hard, speaking personally, and I know for the team, as the number of survivors coming forward has been overwhelming. Each having their own different experience different allegations from a different period in time. And I know that with a lot of new survivors that have come forward, they've been somewhat concerned at times with any delays in getting back. But I can tell you, quite frankly, we do not rush any person who comes to speak to us. I don't care if they stay on the phone for an hour or 2 hours, and they can phone us at any time of day, and we're always available. But we will not rush through anybody's case. So I don't care. It's been difficult for us doing it, I have to admit, but that is nothing compared to what our survivors have had to experience and what they've been through, and the trauma that they're still going through today when they try to help others and relive what has happened to them in the past. So we're doing the necessary work of listening to the allegations, gathering and supporting evidence, and learning more about Fayyad and the systems and organisations that enabled his abhorrent behaviour. And that understanding is developing, and the scale of it is absolutely horrifying. When we got first involved with Keaton's investigation, we were dealing with 4 ladies. And that's a while ago now, Keaton, isn't it? When we filmed for the BBC this summer with the documentary, it was 19 women, And then by the time we spoke at the last press conference, we represented 37 survivors of the Harrods abuse. As of today, we've now had inquiries from over 421 people. I say that again, we are handling 421 inquiries. The majority of those contacting us are from the UK, but the claims against Harrods and Fayyad are still coming in from all around the world. Canada, Asia, Australia, America and Europe. And I can give you some breakdown here of some of the countries and the amounts have come in from the UK and USA. There's 12 ladies from America. Australia, 6 ladies. United Arab Emirates, 3. Canada, 2. And then Denmark, Spain, Thailand, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Italy, Romania and Malaysia. That, in our opinion, is an industrial scale abuse. Abuse that could have only been perpetrated with a system that enabled the abuse to happen. And that is what is so key to this case, and why this case, as I've said before, in many ways is the worst case of corporate sexual abuse of women that the world has ever known. This system was in place for many, many years, too many years. And now it's time to seek justice on behalf of our survivors so that the world can finally understand the truth of what really happened within the walls of Harrods. We now also have credible evidence of abuse by Mohammed Fayyad at Fulham, at Park Lane residences, his estate in Surrey, his aircraft, the Ritz Hotel in Paris, Villa Windsor in France, as well as abuse on his yacht in Saint-Tropez, and so bravely described by our client Melissa, the daughter of a former US ambassador to Britain. And so we are today announcing that we're also working on pursuing a claim against the Al Fayyad estate, given how much the abuse was perpetrated in this network beyond Harrods. As Maria said when we last gathered, everywhere Fayyad went, abuse followed. Whether you're an ambassador's daughter, the daughter of a famous footballer, or a complete unknown starting their first job in a strange city. It appears that every young lady in his orbit was a target. We make no distinction in our work between those who are known or unknown. We're proud of them all and committed to justice for each and every one of them. I will say that again. We are committed to justice for each and every person who comes to us. Nowhere was a network of abuse more developed than at Harrods. From the so-called development in-store apartments approvals to the owner of his security hunting for targets on the shop floor, to his private office, to the security office swooping in to threaten after abuse or after a survivor had threatened to speak out. It was an organisation-wide system of abuse. Organised abuse. There is a clear evidence of a team of enablers who supported Fayad. We expect these enablers will eventually be named by the press and face further consequences. I've said from the very start of this case, anybody who harmed these ladies in any way, we will be using our best endeavours to hold them accountable. Anybody. We're talking to a number of previous staff members from Harrods who are helping former security staff. They have been incredibly helpful in developing our understanding of the systems that were in place. And I can say plainly that given all we know now, our survivors just do not trust Harrods to do the right thing with regards to a settlement process. That's not me speaking, that's this lady speaking. I mean, would you? I mean, given the continued presence of so many members of staff, senior members of staff, from Fayad's regime and with the business, who are still there. Given his leadership crossover, a fair question, it would seem to me as if we hit what is the busiest time of year for retail. Question, whether the people who shop at Harrods trust them to do the right thing. A further question that bears asking. Do the brands with concessions with Harrods trust them to do the right thing? And I leave that as a pause for thought here for all of us. To talk more about the concerning Harrods settlement process, I will now hand her over to my colleague Maria.
Thank you, Bruce. I would like to concentrate on the Harrods settlement process, or the Harrods compensation scheme, as it has been referred to. I know that some women have been somewhat confused by this title, and some women have interpreted this as being their only route or only option for accountability. So it's important that we are clear about what this process is. And just to be clear, the Harrods settlement process compensation scheme is that it is a Harrods-led and a Harrods-controlled process. What's more, this settlement scheme is just one of three things that Harrods are trying to do concurrently, since they say new information came to light in 2023. According to a BBC article from the 23rd of September, Harrods have confirmed an ongoing internal review supported by external counsel looking at whether any current staff were involved in any of the allegations, either directly or indirectly. Harrods say that this internal review began in 2023. Harrods also say that they are in direct communication with the Metropolitan to offer their assistance with any inquiries, including forwarding police correspondence directly to the people using the settlement scheme. Some of our survivors, I know, have found it quite distressing to receive a letter to them directly from the police unannounced, particularly when some of them may have actually made their own complaint to the police many years ago. These free streams of activity prompt a series of questions for me and our team. What new information actually came to light in 2023? We still haven't been told this information. Who from Harrods designed and is leading this ongoing internal review? Did anyone who is still within the business from the Al Fayed times recuse themselves from discussion over the design and execution of this review? How is this review going? We haven't had an update. I haven't heard anything about this internal review. Also, was this internal review prompted by the new information that Harrods says came to light? What does the indirect involvement of Harrods staff actually cover and include? For example, does it cover anyone with knowledge of Al Fayed's questioning by police in 2008 after a 15-year-old employed on the shop floor accused him of indecent assault? Does it cover that? In relation to the settlement scheme, who created, who designed, who drafted this scheme and authorised the same? Does it involve anyone who might be subject to this ongoing internal review? Has the Harrods settlement process been signed off by the current leadership and ownership? It is also not known if the settlement scheme that is operating now is the same as the scheme that was in place in the summer of 2023, when we know that survivors started being offered settlements. And it's important to clarify that some of our survivors actually started being offered settlements before Mohammed Al Fayed actually passed away. We as a team have previously voiced our concerns over some of the settlements that have been offered to survivors previously. The current Harrods settlement scheme or compensation scheme, whatever they would like to call it, also appears to be undocumented. We are aware that some survivors have been told by a law firm that is administering the scheme that the FAQs are still being drafted. If this is the same scheme, why was everything not documented when it was created in 2023? On the 21st of October, the Financial Times, Susie Ring and Laura Anita, published a detailed piece on the compensation scheme, having investigated and spoken to 4 survivors themselves. For clarity, we represent 3 of these women. 1 survivor is represented by other lawyers. The key features of this article and the facts reported were as follows. All 4 women have stopped using the Harrods' own settlement scheme due to concerns that they had. 2 of the women felt that Harrods had not been transparent about the individuals who was handling and dealing with their complaints. The allegation made was that the individual handling the complaints had been stated as being an external consultant, but it transpired that this individual had previously worked for Harrods for over a decade, both on the shop floor and in the Human Resources Department, until the summer of 2023, when this individual then became an external consultant, who was, at that point, then tasked with the job of investigating survivors' allegations. Harrods have denied that they have not been transparent and said that this individual is indeed the correct person to be handling their process. As always, I have some questions that arise from this. Is this person, this individual, subject to or part of the ongoing internal review given their long employment history within Harrods? Or does this person fall outside the scope of that review, as this person was not employed by Harrods in the summer of 2023? Does this individual reveal their long employment history with Harrods stretching back to the Al Fayed times when they speak to the survivors? Concerns raised by some of the survivors that we represent is an allegation that this individual now only uses their first name on their signature of email. Some survivors have found this slightly odd, particularly when many of them are very frightened and have concerns over their personal safety. There is also an allegation that one survivor was invited to attend a Teams call to discuss her allegations of abuse with this individual. This call lasted a long time and involved the woman being questioned in great detail about her allegations, to the extent that the survivor felt that she was effectively being cross-examined. This required her to, of course, relive a lot of her trauma. This was something that she hadn't been prepared for. She didn't know, but that was the process and that was what was going to happen to her. And she called me after this had happened the following day, saying that she was very upset with herself that she had allowed that to happen, because she simply had no idea that that was going to take place in the way that it did. I emphasised in the Financial Times article that any settlement process in place needs to be both independent and transparent. It is not known, as it does not appear to be documented, if these women and survivors are having or have been offered the benefit of independent expert evidence to support their claims before any settlement offers are being made, and this is key. For instance, access to expert evidence to opine on their prognosis, causation, the impact the abuse and suffering has had on their lives for many, many years. For many survivors, the abuse and the suffering is very complex indeed. Harrods have previously stated publicly that any settlement process was designed to ensure swift and impartial outcomes. I have to say that many of the survivors that we represent, or almost all of them, do not necessarily want a swift outcome. They want and they deserve a proper outcome, with all the evidence having been gathered and with access to all independent expert evidence that they would be entitled to support the quantification of their claims. I and the team will continue to work to ensure that any settlement process dealing with the survivors is, where necessary, scrutinised and held to account.
Thank you, Maria. Anyone who wants to read that FT article, it's on the front page of last Saturday's Financial Times. So a few words from me about Fulham Football Club. I have spoken previously and publicly about the tentacles that Al-Fayed had over his various businesses owned and controlled through him. One such business was Fulham Football Club. We heard, through the incredible bravery of one of our survivors, Ronnie Gibbons, how at 20 years old she was abused by Al-Fayed, having been trapped in a room above Harrods. And I'm going to just stress that, because I talk about tentacles, I talk about linkage. A football club, a major department store. Here, a 20-year-old woman's footballer is taken and trapped in a room in that very same department store. Ronnie was captain of Fulham Ladies. She was summoned to visit Al-Fayed and driven by club staff to Knightsbridge, where twice she was left alone with a 71-year-old man, Al-Fayed, falsely imprisoned and sexually abused.
We're going to step away from that press conference with Dean Armstrong KC and listen instead now to the Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez. He's speaking at the Emergency Services Coordination Centre in Valencia.
People that we will fully collaborate through our ministries and through local government, the crisis committee that we've set up, so that we can give you a peace of mind and provide the answers that are required and that are so difficult to find. This crisis has now been raised to level 2, the Dana weather phenomenon. The Spanish government has mobilized a huge amount of resources and of people. We have over 1,000 soldiers that have been sent here, primarily to Valencia, over 1,800 national police members, 750 civil guard, 200 land soldiers and some 300 vehicles, helicopters and aircraft that are required for the civil protection work for the local government in Valencia. And I wish to tell you that any additional resource that's needed, you can count on the government of Spain. As I said yesterday, we will not abandon the people of Valencia. We will be here with you for all the time necessary and deploying all resources necessary. Our priority, obviously, right now is to find victims, to find missing persons, also so that
successfully, as did so many of our survivors. Everything that I've just read out is shocking. Perhaps the most shocking feature of the lot is it is completely factual. Women's sport, which is so rightly celebrated in this country and across the world, needs, as a reference point, to look back upon these events. And we will, through our work, make sure that an apology is simply not enough. In common with my colleagues, I too have some questions. My first is to Fulham. Why, if this abuse wasn't known about within Fulham ladies, was there a need to, quote, protect the players? What practices or processes were in place to effect that protection, if that was what was seemingly needed? And perhaps the most important of the lot, what is going to happen now? What proposals do Fulham / Harrods have? And it's important in this context that I put them in the same bracket. Fulham / Harrods. What proposals do they have to give Ronnie the justice that she deserves? Once again, the silence from Harrods is deafening. You will recall in the BBC documentary the words of Tony Leeming, a former department manager, who said the following: "I think if I knew, everybody knew. Anyone who says they didn't are lying. I'm sorry." We are here, and we have a website to seek justice for Fulham survivors, but most importantly, as importantly in terms of the generalities of what I'm saying today, that website is for anyone who has suffered abuse in a sporting context. In our view, young women must be able to pursue their sporting dreams free from the threat of sexual assault and free from having to accept that sexualised behaviour without concerns has to be tolerated in order not to hinder the development of sport. Ball gowns and tight football shorts must be surely a thing of the past. What we're going to do now, we are going to play a short video from one of our survivors. It's in a football context. And then I shall come back to you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Ronnie Gibbons, and I'm the former captain of Fulham Ladies football team. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak and share my truth. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person. I would have really liked to have met some of the other amazingly brave ladies who are speaking up about Mohammed Al-Fayed and his appalling behaviour. Seeing you speak helped me to have the courage to get in touch with the barristers. And as difficult as it's been very empowering, and I know that by speaking out we are making it harder for this kind of behaviour to be tolerated anywhere. I know we are making it easier for others to speak up. I wish I had the same support system when I went through what I did. I'm a parent now, and one of the main reasons I'm doing this is to make a better world for my child and future generations. Thank you to everybody for listening to me, and a huge thank you to Maria and the team for believing all of us ladies. The truth will set us free. Thank you, and I hope to see you all soon.
Just one of our amazing survivors. So, now we open up the floor to questions. We will do our very best, as we always do and have done in the past, to answer. You will all be aware that we are bound by confidentiality and also bound by the fact that clearly issues are sensitive. But as we always do, we will do our very best to help. So, questions, please.
Put your hand up and get a room mic to you.
Hi, Simon. With a few honourable exceptions, it is remarkable that none of these allegations were in the media for over such a long time, involving so many people. Given the survivors you've spoken to now, can you expand on that? Are you any clearer as to how this was kept out of the media for so long?
Well, I'll have a go. I said during the currency of my remarks that our survivors have been thoroughly let down by society. Thoroughly let down. It's in the public domain that a number of our survivors went to the police. Nothing happened. It's in the public domain that even if prosecutions began to be launched, they've been met with insufficient evidence. It's in the public domain that threats and abuse to our survivors and countless others who we may never know were effective in some areas and precluded them from speaking out. Do the media have culpability? I don't know. What I do know is 400, in excess of 400 people have engaged with us about this process, citing historical sexual abuse at the hands of Mohammed al-Fayed. Those 400 people are courageous. Many of those would have been willing, I'm sure, to speak out at the time, but were precluded from doing so.
Do you know if there were stories that were going to run that then were shown?
Well, I think we do know publicly. Bruce, you may be able to help on that. But we know publicly that at least one television programme, I think on Channel 4, was shut down.
Yeah, I think that the media, in fairness, who I would say have been absolutely fantastic in supporting these ladies this time round. I think that they faced an awful lot of pressure, both from Fayed and his lawyers, and that although, you know, you could argue, well, I wish they'd been a bit braver and this would have helped. In the face of so many complaints being made to the police that haven't been pursued, I mean, I can speak very frankly and say I got quite fed up with hearing from these desperately sad cases the survivors have said to me when I'm talking to them about the times that they've made complaints to the police and nothing happened. It's hardly surprising that they got despondent in what they were trying to do, and why the media felt probably restricted in what they could say.
I think also it's important to remember excuse me, that many of our survivors were absolutely petrified, and many of them are still petrified today, and that's the overarching background to many of the women that we represent. They were effectively silenced by a security team that was enforced by Harrods and Mohammed al-Fayed. And that fear prevails with many of those women to this very day. When they're walking their dog, they're having flashbacks, they're looking over their shoulder, because they had nowhere to turn, nobody to go to. Even if they did go to the police, we know that some of them were not listened to. And so we must not forget that overarching fear that was there for them. What are you to do in that situation?
And Simon, just something to add which may assist. The documentary, the BBC documentary aired on the 19th of September, deals very well, if I may say so, with Vanity Fair's efforts to try and expose the monster that was Fayed, and the obstacles that they faced, which were, sad to say, symbols of the time. We also have, don't we, someone whose name cropped up in the Fulham report in respect of Ronnie's abuse, Max Clifford, who was also on the documentary, who was responsible at the time for killing stories that didn't suit the narrative. So, to reiterate the points that have been made by my colleagues, there was nowhere to go. You couldn't go to HR in Harrods because he was HR. You couldn't go to the media because he had powerful friends and influencers. And very, very sadly, it doesn't seem as if you go to the police.
Hello, Charlie Peters, GB News. Judges dislike cases where the abuser is dead and can't be questioned for obvious reasons. Are you concerned about some of the legal hurdles here, in particular as a potential time bar, defence for the Fayed estate and Harrods, and liabilities for survivors who were not employees of either institution? Thank you.
Yeah, no. The simple answer is no. We are not concerned about any of those obstacles, and we would not have taken the massive steps that we have taken to date in representing a large number of survivors if we were gravely concerned about those obstacles. Of course, obstacles always exist in litigation, and it's our role to plan our attack so that we can overcome those obstacles. And I am absolutely confident, as our team members are, that we shall overcome all obstacles that come our way. We shall do whatever is needed to bring justice and accountability for the women we represent, whether that's in the High Court or whether it's through other actions that we may need to take against other companies or other individuals. We will just do what is needed, and we will not stop until the job is done.
And can I just add to that? Thank you, Maria. There seems to be, let's hope there isn't two rules here, because Harrods don't seem to be concerned about limitation periods or NDAs, because they've got their own settlement process which supposedly is immune from those legal issues. They don't seem to be raising those points against themselves. So we would be rather disappointed if they raised them against us. It would seem to me to be about the lowest thing that could possibly happen.
Yeah.
And another question for Harrods, but I can pose this through you, Charlie. We publicly invited Harrods to say that they would not use limitation periods and arguments about limitation as a time bar to our cases. If you've had an answer to that, then you're lucky, because I haven't. We still await their answer. And we would like them to answer us. If anybody is listening from Harrods is listening to this, we would like an answer, please, as a matter of courtesy.
Next question.
Hi, Rob Harris from Sky News. On Fulham, how many players are survivors that have come forward, and how cooperative have they been? And when you talk about other sporting institutions, how potentially could they be liable, and which institutions?
So in terms of victims of Mohammed Al-Fayed, we have Ronnie Gibbons, only the one player, and then we have another of other individuals who were employed at Fulham Football Club that we represent, and they may have held various different positions within the club, and they make allegations against Mohammed Al-Fayed. Have I answered all of your question, or is that? Okay.
So, which other sporting institutions do you think are liable, and how?
So at this point in time, we don't have any other sporting institutions within our sites, but as these things develop, and as they have done since we had our last press conference, for instance, Ronnie reached out to me after our last press conference, and that obviously evolved into that whole Fulham Football Club story. So at this point in time, it is Fulham, but in due course, we don't know how this story will unravel or what other allegations will emerge. Dean, do you have anything to add on?
No, no, just to reiterate, on the 20th of September we weren't talking about Fulham. We are now. As our next one of these, where hopefully we will be announcing that someone's made an effort to speak to us, we may be announcing other sporting institutions. As you will all be aware, very, very sadly, the courage that it takes one individual, let alone more than one, to come forward and say, I was abused. All of the consequences that has on their family relationships, on their work relationships, how they engage with other people, are just too huge to even contemplate. Do I think we will be talking to you about other sporting institutions and abuse? Very, very sadly, I think we will. Not today.
Olivia Guthrie from ITV News. I've got two questions for you. On the last presser, you said that you have 37 survivors who were now instructing you. Can you tell me how many of the 421 people who've been in touch have now instructed you?
It's an ongoing process because it takes some time to actually process a client to make sure they're happy, to make sure they understand. I think that of the 400 inquiries we're dealing with, we've got to about 160 who've gone through with the paperwork, and then another 100 and I think 150 have been sent out the paperwork, and then the rest of them have still got to be spoken to, because before we can do anything we have to have a conversation with them and speak to them and get their story and find out, you know, what it is that's happened to them and, you know, what they want to do. And it does take time, and we're in no rush. You know, it's not a numbers game at all. It's about a people's game, and I'm more happy to have one person who's had their story told properly, even if it took me a whole day to do it. It doesn't faze me.
Can I just assist here, because what I think it's important that we make clear, and lawyers sometimes justifiably have a bad reputation for perhaps lack of care. This is our process. Our process is that someone makes contact with us, directly or through the website, and every single person has an individual conversation, mostly with respect, with Maria and Bruce, and has that individual conversation, explains to them anything and everything that they can, and it's not always the first time. And that conversation then begins a process of onboarding. It is not the usual legal onboarding process. No. One of the reasons that we require help is that important aspect of the personal touch of our process is incredibly worthwhile, but incredibly time-consuming.
It is.
And also quite overwhelming when you're speaking to so many women who suffered terribly on a daily basis, and we are all individual practitioners. We all also have other cases that we deal with as well as this case, and so to give everybody the time that they actually deserve and they need, we need help with that. And we have assured all of the survivors that we represent and who we will come to represent in the future that we will still be on hand. I will still be there to pick up the phone and to speak to them about any aspect that they need me to, because that's my role in this. I need people to feel safe, I need people to feel heard, and it's by giving that safe space to many of the women that others have felt strong enough to come forward. So that process won't stop. I will still be there, Bruce will still be there, we'll still be doing that. We just need some help in the background to provide the engine to the system that we are running to date. And it's that which we are incredibly proud of. I'm incredibly proud of my colleagues, the way that they deal with that process, the way they deal with those people, because, as I've said before, and
and I'm going to be completely candid here. As a man, I will never be able to understand and appreciate the suffering. Never. We can only do our best to be empathetic and to do our best as men to try and understand what our survivors are going through. But what we can do is make sure that we can give every single bit of support that is possible. And so the process, we're often asked the question quite sensibly and fairly, how many people have you got signed up? Bruce, if I may say so, explained it so well. The signature on the piece of paper is just the beginning. Yeah. But part of the process is the ability and the fact that we understand the individual cases. I'm always saying that we will never embark upon a class action here, notwithstanding the amounts and the size of the class, because every individual survivor has suffered in a different way. Yeah. And we will never ever be blind to that. We will always do our very best to understand that this is something which is much, much bigger than just names on a list.
Yeah, I think I would like to emphasise and make it known that we don't just sign everybody up. There is a process that we go through in terms of testing the allegations that are being made and determining if the survivors who are making these allegations, making sure that they have credible claims. We don't just sign up everybody. There have been, a couple of individuals that I've had questions about, and so it's a rigorous process. And yes, as Dean says, it's a process that I'm very proud of.
So, Bruce, you may just for a couple of minutes, and we won't take the process too long, but just give us a flavour of the kinds of things, not specific clearly, but the kinds of things that you speak about.
When I normally ring up, or they ring me, whatever, it's normally quite a sort of strange start to a conversation, because they obviously have all this, badness inside them they need to get out, and they often have never said anything to anybody for some 20, 30 years about it. They haven't even told their husbands in some cases. Their families didn't know. And so they're always very nervous to start when I speak, and I find that just a general chit-chat with them is helpful, just to talk about something they might be interested in or whatever, to get somebody speaking so they feel comfortable to speak. And when they speak, it just comes out. It just comes out in one shot. It's all out. It's a very strange, these ladies all know so well, that it's how it just comes out, And so often I will say, after we've gone so far, and often they're terribly distressed when they're talking, I would probably say, during that process, that maybe we should take a break, and then, we can digest. I'll send you out a client care agreement, so you can, we'd be delighted to look after you if you want us to, and then after that, have another call when you can talk more. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they want to say it all in one go and get it all out. And that process in itself is, I'm no psychologist, but it has been, in my eyes, very much a healing process for them to actually come and speak without being frightened to speak about it for the first time ever, and not being ashamed about it. They come and talk about it, and that's what they want to do. And not one person out of all those who've contacted me has ever said to me, how much do you think my claim's worth? Never. I have to say to them, oh, you do know that we're going to try and get you some compensation, don't you? I'm not fussed, not fussed about the money. It's not that.
So we're very proud of our process.
Oh,
very proud.
Yeah.
I think it's also important to say that we always say to the survivors, go away, have a think about this. You don't have to, you don't have to use this because obviously we are barristers, so we are slightly different from the other options out there. But it's ultimately their choice at the end of the day, and they have a chance to go away. Obviously, all the regulatory aspects are also covered off. So just to add that on, the boring bit.
Yes, thank you. Well, I normally say
So
to
is
them
me.
after phone call, I say,
That bit on.
okay, we'll send you a client care letter, and you can either put it in the bin or you can sign it and join us. More than happy, And they always have a laugh at that.
So that was quite a long answer.
Yes.
That was a long answer. Sorry.
I have one supplementary question, if I may. You have said that the Fulham FC Survivors is inviting people from all sporting areas to come forward. What's behind that request? If you're able to
Sadly, the answer to the gentleman earlier, sadly the fact that I don't find it credible to suggest that Althea's abuse on Ronnie is an isolated case. Unfortunately, wherever there is the power imbalance between a man and a woman, there is going to be evidence of abuse. And that's a very, very sad fact of our lives. And what we don't want is for anyone to feel in the position that our survivors here felt, very much to Simon's question earlier, I have nowhere to go and I've got no one to speak to.
It's also not just a man on woman position. It's wherever there's a power to abuse a position of trust, people unfortunately are often abused. And so we want to make it clear that that website is for everybody, that might help.
Sorry, I've got one here. Laura Nita, Financial Times. You obviously mentioned that you now have the backing of a big law firm behind you. Are you able to share which law firm that is? And then I think you also referenced, something like, was it 1 billion type firepower behind you to fight this? How did you get to that number? Is that the backing of the law firm? Thank you.
Yes, we can't at the moment give you their name.
No.
Not because there's anything sinister in it, but for two reasons. One, we will sign off with them today, probably. But more importantly, everyone in this room, but most importantly the survivors in this room and our survivors watching, will be told chapter and verse before anybody else is. And I can tell you that they're hugely impressive, they're hugely experienced. Where do I get £1 billion from? It's from the fact that that's what their owners have as a capability in terms of
The owners of the law firm.
yes, they are owned by. I won't go into too much detail, but they are owned by people who have that capacity. Because sadly, what we were hoping for, and perhaps I'm, despite my age, perhaps I'm still naive in this sense, I was rather hoping for the fact that when you have a documentary and you have a number of women survivors who come on, and then you have a lot more survivors who come on and say this happened to me, and the experiences that they recount are so strikingly similar as to preclude any suggestion of collusion. I rather naively hoped that Harrods, for example, might have said, how can we help? 6 weeks down the line from that press conference, we're still waiting for the Harrods management to say, how can we help? Yes, there's been contact about their scheme.
Yeah.
But as you, if I may respectfully say so, and thank you very much, and we I generally want to say thank you for your assistance and your excellent reporting. People need to look at that scheme. I'll say nothing else, but people need to read your article and consider whether that's a just, independent, thorough process. That's for other people to say. So, whilst we are very pleased to have a powerful law firm helping us, we so wish it hadn't come to this.
Hello, Ellington from PA Media. Couple of numbers questions for you. The first one, quite similar to what we've had, and I appreciate what you said in response there. But so you've said you've been contacted by over 400 people now, including survivors and witnesses. I was wondering whether you could help with how many of that total are survivors, and how many were at Harrods or Fulham or elsewhere. And then the second numbers question is how many people are in that first letter of claim?
Okay, so I will deal with that question. I don't want to be held to the numbers too much because they change so frequently.
They change daily.
And by the time I see press reports talking about numbers, I know that they've changed so much by the time that report has gone to print. So I know that personally I have spoken to in excess of 25 people who wanted to get in touch, not because they themselves were seeking any kind of recourse, but because they wanted to support the women survivors, and they provide witness evidence, they provide documents, they say that they were privy to certain discussions about certain things, and so we have that angle, that number of people who I alone have spoken to, so that we do have a database of all of these things and a very complicated spreadsheet that I am not in charge of updating or checking or anything like that, and so I am updated on that. But so that's about the number of witnesses that I personally have spoken to, and there may be more than that. I'm happy to say that the majority of that 400 figure are survivors in the Harrods context, but also there are a number of survivors who would have a claim against the estate because they were not necessarily employed by Harrods, but would have been abused by Mohammed Al-Fayed at different locations. So, for instance, on his yacht, or different locations and not in the same employment context. So there's those different strands. And for each person that we speak to, obviously we have a process of determining which strand they might possibly fall into, and making sure that they are dealt with accordingly. So I know I've kind of fudged that slightly, but does that provide you with the answer that you need?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
And I think Bruce is going to deal with the letters of claim.
Yeah, the first letter of claim's gone out, and that is in respect of one survivor that we represent and have represented, and it is literally the first of hundreds to come. It's going to snowball and snowball. It's just really the practicalities of actually drafting, because you can't just draft up a letter and send it. The letter of claim is a legal process in the litigation under what they call the civil procedure rules. And so that letter has to be verified by the client to be accurate. So you have to draft it, you have to put it in a particular way, send it to the client. Client looks, reads through, maybe has some amendments, etc. Then it goes back to you, you check some amendments out or change them. So that's why it's not just a print and press process. We have to be right. But where we are now, there will be literally hundreds flowing within the next few weeks, and especially when the new law firm formally become engaged. Thank you.
A couple more and then get moving. Is there any more questions?
Yes, one at the back.
Hi, it's Dipesh from the Sunday Times. Thanks for doing this press conference. I just wanted to clarify, as far as the Met police investigation is concerned, can you clarify how many of your clients have actually gone to the Met Police? That's both historically from the 21 that they were talking about, and they're now saying there's an additional 60, I think, survivors who've come forward. And more importantly, do you actually have any faith in what the Met is now doing, given what's gone on before?
I can answer that because I've spoken to an awful lot of the ladies who, yes, I said before, you know, I was getting fed up with them saying they've been to the Met and doing nothing. But I haven't got numbers, so it's not something to keep a record of, at that point. Because certainly, at one point, I think that when that does become, if it becomes an issue, we would find out more exact details. But there are a lot, I can say that.
Yeah, a lot of our survivors went to the Met.
They did
over the years.
Yeah.
I think it's fair, and I think it's important that we clarify clearly. A lot of our survivors have recently been approached by representatives of the Met and other police forces. It's not just the Met. It's important that we don't single them out. We have said previously, and we continue to say, that any decision of any of our survivors to go and speak to the police is entirely their own. The Met Police, if they don't already know, will, I'm sure, appreciate that in lots of cases there are trust issues. Because a lot of our survivors, in their hours of need, went to the police and little or nothing was done. This is not a comment.
I'm having some trouble with the connection.
Someone's having trouble with my connection, by the sound of it. So what we say about that is we are not expressing a view negatively on the police force currently. What they are doing is what they are doing. We don't know, and we're not party to what they're seeking to do. We can look at historically at what happened and what has happened, or more importantly, what didn't happen. And we draw very strong negative conclusions about that. So our advice to our clients is, if you wish to engage with the police, we will support you completely. If you don't, we will support that decision too. It's an entirely personal one.
It is, of course.
Some aren't ready to discuss with police officers about their experiences. Some do not wish to go on the record, to use the expression. The issue of the Met Police is a very difficult one. But one thing I will say, none of that is the fault of any of our survivors.
No.
This is the last one now.
Hi, Ed Southgate from The Sun. You spoke earlier about enablers around Al Fayed. How big was his web of enablers? How many have you identified, and are they still living?
It was a very large web. Some of them are still alive. It's not in our ability to name names or announce who those individuals are, but I know the press are working very hard to identify and to ensure that those individuals are also brought to justice for the role that they have played in bringing many of the survivors into Mohammed Al Fayed's lair. And we know that that process is ongoing, but in terms of our individual abilities, we're not able, of course, today or at any point in the near future to name anyone that we know is involved.
Any assistance that the members of the media can give us in terms of pointing to enablers, putting names to enablers, we would be very grateful for. Because we haven't hidden from the fact that this process could never take place, this abuse could never take place without enablers.
No.
And we are aware of certain media sections who are very close to naming names. We welcome that.